Okay, this is Moshe coming to you from Israel and the Galilee. The Israel-Hamas war, combined with Hezbollah war, is at its most critical point that it ever was, I think. Well, maybe not in the beginning was more critical, but this is very serious, and I'll explain you why. Biden and other countries want us not to continue the war after the ceasefires in exchange for the hostages. There can be a maximum of ceasefires now. Friday night would be the end of the last ceasefire. Now, that could be extended to, I think, Sunday. But they passed an approval in the Knesset on the ceasefires, and there's a maximum of 10 days, which I think ends Sunday. So it would probably be Monday, 12:01 a.m. or something like that. Netanyahu and the gang are all saying they're going to continue the war vigorously. Biden's going to have something else to say. Now, Biden did make a public announcement 3-4 days ago that he said he might not support Israel if they continue the war. All right? Bear that in mind. That was him out of his mouth publicly on worldwide TV. So don't think that it's so simple. Now, yesterday the UN passed, the General Assembly, which has no teeth, passed a decision that Israel should get out of the Golan Heights that belong to Syria and give it back. So they're trying to coerce Israel to voluntarily return the land. The chances of that happening right now are zero. Not 1%, zero. It's not happening. That was because Israel was saying the UN doesn't do anything to enforce the 2006 ruling where Hezbollah has to be by that river. I think it's 15 miles inland, something like that. Hezbollah is running around on the fences openly with guns and everything else, and the soldiers can see them. Now, the people that live in the north near the Lebanese border are afraid to go back there. They don't want to find out that something like what happened October 7th is going to happen to them. Now, I think they believe that the national government is very worried about that, but I don't think the national government is that worried about that. They figure they'll just, maybe they'll have to make provisions for them for another month or something, and then they'll get tired and go back. What happens when we start attacking Hamas again? Does Hezbollah jump in vigorously or not? Now, that UN General Assembly ruling could be moved to the UN Security Council, which has teeth and can raise soldiers to go over there and tell Israel they have to evacuate, remove the people out of the Golan Heights and everything else. And Biden could say, well, you're going to keep the war going on Hamas, I'm not going to veto it. The UK is not going to veto it then. So that's something I see coming. Okay? I see that coming. Biden doesn't want to see a winner. Nobody is telling us what we're supposed to do with the 45,000 or more terrorists in Gaza. What do we do with them? Nobody wants them. Egypt has been building what's called bulwarks, Bulwark, bulwarks. It's a large pile of dirt and rock and stuff to take the place of a fence. And they probably put observation posts in there and they could watch people. So you can't just easily run across. You've got to climb up this kind of wall of dirt. I mean, you could do it, but it's going to slow you down. And Egypt is saying not one Palestinian is coming to live in Egypt. See, nobody wants these people, but they all want Israel to have them. See what I'm saying? Because they're that bad. So we know prophetically America is going to turn on Israel, and I think this is approaching it. And if Netanyahu decides to say, okay, we're going to give in to Biden and the war's over, go home, soldiers, they're going to remove him from office. There's provisions to do that in the government. They'll simply break the coalition, and then he's relegated to being a interim prime minister till they hold an election in 90 days. However, they could accelerate that to 30 days if the Knesset wanted to because of the urgency, or even quicker. Now, there's a possibility one of the other politicos, like Gallant, would throw his hat in the ringer with Netanyahu, but I don't think he wants that. I don't think because why? He could just wait, Netanyahu gets thrown out, and then he becomes the prime minister. Not that things are going to get much better in Israel. Don't delude yourself. That ain't going to happen. None of them are going to do anything really good for Israel. They're all cut out of the same Espot cloth. So don't think that. Don't delude yourself. Probably wouldn't be as bad as Netanyahu. Netanyahu has no intentions of going to jail. Now, as an interim prime minister, he can't initiate things like judicial reform. He can't change laws. He's just a caretaker till the new election. Now, he could get reelected again, but I wouldn't plan on it. I would say the chances of that happening are probably around 20% or less even. So we're in critical mass here. Israel is definitely suffering a revolution in the West Bank from Palestinians that are affiliated with Hamas and other organizations that are named terrorist groups. And we're having active combat with them every day. And some of them are getting killed. And, there's explosives and shooting. It's blowing up buildings. I mean, it's a real mess. There's a revolution going on in Israel, a limited one, just by the terrorist-oriented or affiliated Palestinians, but still a revolution. It's mostly in Nablus, Hebron, and Jenin, and mostly that's what I hear. Jenin is the hot spot right now. So during the ceasefire, and even before the ceasefire, Israel's routing them out. It's a vulnerability. The Americans have not taken any decisive action against the Iranian attacks, Iranian-inspired attacks on their military bases in Iraq and Syria. They're just letting it go. I mean, they're responding, weakly, lightly. What else can I tell you? Hostages came out again tonight, and they're telling you hostages are healthy, and one, I think she's 9-year-old girl, won't look her family in the eye. She won't stop whispering because they didn't let her talk when she was in captivity. I believe she thought she was captive for a year, and it was like 50-something days. And she gets into the bed and puts the covers over her head and whispers until she falls asleep. I would not call that well. Now, will Israel get her the proper medical care for this? If there is such a proper medical care, yes, they will. They will, absolutely. And because she's 9 years old, there's a high probability she'll recover. It may take a few months, but... So the people aren't all that well that are coming out of there. The small children, let's say 9 years old and less, they're averaging 15% weight loss. So, it wasn't so nice, okay? Now, there's situations where people are taken prisoner by an enemy and they're treated like pretty good, So anyway, it wasn't horrific, but it wasn't very good either. There's some belly aching now in the UN. Some women's rights group is saying, well, they were doing sexual assaults on the women, and we got to move on that with international criminal court cases for that. Well, that's the first time I heard any women's rights person or organization, she's in the UN, speak up about this, you know? I mean, I'm not hearing nothing about female circumcision, are you? No. Gloria Steinem is probably a very old lady or deceased right now. So there's nobody speaking out on this. There's nobody speaking out on their other heinous practices. We're in a rough spot right now. I don't know which way it's going to go. Netanyahu is reassuring everybody the war is going to continue. But just coincidentally, the UN General Assembly came up with this ruling yesterday, and it could now move to the UN Security Council, which is probably going to happen. Maybe not, but probably. And Biden needs to veto it, or the UK or somebody, or it's going to go forward. 91 people in the UN voted to have Israel leave the Golan Heights. 65 abstained, and there was like 6 or 8 that voted against it, something like that. So I'm surprised at the large number of those that abstained, but I think that's because the horrific massacre of October 7th was too much for them to, hook their wagon to. It was just, appalling. There were some small military skirmishes in Gaza today, even though there was a ceasefire. The Palestinians are claiming we're flying surveillance planes, and America is. America said they're not. I don't believe Israel is, or actually there's a certain number of hours a day that Israel has to not fly the planes. The talk of Hamas saying we want 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 prisoners released to get the soldiers and stuff like that. Qatar shut that down. They told them, hey, you ain't getting that. They're not going to agree. Just get off of that bandwagon. So what is Hamas going to do when the ceasefire runs out? I don't know. Hezbollah and the Houthis just came to the aid of Hamas in a tokenism fashion. They didn't really go whole hog and dig their heels in and start fighting like Hamas did. Chances are they won't. I think they've written off Hamas. The real estate is decimated. I don't know how they're going to control. I don't know what they're going to do, Israel is saying that we can't have Europeans or Americans manage it. We got to be there for a while until we're sure that they're completely demilitarized and they're not going to rise up. So we're at a point where we may see the beginning of America turn against us, okay? And we may see the war expand or not. And Hamas has had all these days to manufacture rockets and missiles, so that's not going to be any fun dealing with them. But Israel doesn't talk about what they've done, but I'm sure they're telling us that they're working on, their preparations. So when it comes to planning a war, if you don't have moron politicians, the Israeli IDF is crackerjack top shelf, no doubt about it. But when you got moron politicians like Netanyahu with an axe to grind on his personal criminal trials, well, then you got another problem that troubles me and many, many, many other people in Israel. So we are at a very, very critical point right now. So today is the first day of the extensions. Tomorrow is 2. No, we're on day 2 then. We got 2 more days of the extensions, and then there's a possibility to extend it 2 more days. And that's the end of it. Because the approval for the ceasefires went through our Congress called the Knesset And it was put in there's a maximum of 10 days. And Ben Gvir and Smotrich, two members of the Knesset with political parties, said that if Netanyahu doesn't go in and wipe out Hamas, they're going to blow the coalition up. And I told you that means Netanyahu is relegated down to a caretaker. Prime Minister can't initiate legislation. And the Supreme Court of Israel probably will move on striking down that law he had passed that you can't remove a prime minister you can only remove a prime minister for health reasons, and you have to have a vote of 75% of the Knesset. Well, just before the war started, the Supreme Court was extremely close to striking that down. They had taken in legal opinions from both sides, from Netanyahu's side and other people that were filing complaints with the Supreme Court about this. And they were pondering these arguments, and it looked like they were definitely going to strike it down because it terminates democracy. There's no more democracy anymore. So Netanyahu could be a rapist, a murderer, a drug addict, and you can't remove him. It's an absurd law. The other thing he had passed is the reasonableness law. It's not really a law. The Supreme Court, by practice, not by written legal law, in our basic laws, it's not in there, has stopped not laws but government actions by saying it's not reasonable. Okay? So if the government said, we want every house to have a Santa Claus and a reindeer on a sled in their front yard before Christmas, I'm being absurd, of course, they could strike it down as it's not reasonable, but they can't strike a law down based on that. So Netanyahu had a law passed that they can't do that, because he was afraid they were going to strike something down that he did. Anyway, look, he gets relegated to interim prime minister. He still has to serve as prime minister to run the war. Those privileges he still has. But he can't do anything with the judicial system. There's many things he can't do. So he's sort of hogtied, but only on one side, And the Supreme Court may just get rid of him. And if they get rid of him, there's going to be an investigation as to what happened on October 7th, because it's pretty weird what happened. And Netanyahu's whole cronies would also become under investigation from the Supreme Court, who does not like Netanyahu and his cronies. So they might do this before they remove Netanyahu, but I don't know. To have Netanyahu and the military investigate what people think they did wrong is idiotic. You have to have an outsider, which is the Supreme Court. And they will dig diligently and see what happens. So right now it's peaceful. There's no red alerts. The social media in Israel is just talking about what Hezbollah will do. One or two big channels are really afraid of Hezbollah. Most are not. And they're talking about the hostages. They're showing pictures of the hostages and reminding everybody what the evil was on October 7th. And I no longer put up the evil pictures and testimonies of how awful it was on October 7th. I did it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I think everybody got the idea, and I stopped doing it, It's just enough's enough, Everybody knows about it. The Navy ships are here. I haven't heard anything being withdrawn. I haven't heard any of the American aircraft leaving or soldiers leaving, nothing like that I'm aware of. And not just me, but many, many other people. So it's not coming out. There's guys that there's people in social media that are belly aching about the banks in America and Switzerland. Listen, you're not going to see any bank failures until war hits America. on the shores, then you'll see it. Or civil war hits America in the country. Before that, they can just bail the banks out endlessly. Forget about it. There's not going to be anything bad happening till they have civil war or they have the invasion of Jeremiah 50:51. Then lots will go wrong. But until then, no, I wouldn't waste much time and energy on it. They just keep shoring the banks up, fund them, merge them. But it's not, maybe some of the guys that own the banks will get wiped out. But I mean, in terms of the general economy, forget about it. It's not going to happen. Okay? Not going to happen. So if Netanyahu does get bumped out and they do accelerate the elections to 30 days, then you'll probably see Gallant win. He'll probably party with Yair Lapid, who's the left wing, and Gallant is left of center. And those two will run it. But they will, in my opinion, continue the war. They won't stop. Gallant was a high-ranking general in the the highest in the Israeli Defense Forces, and then for a reasonably brief period of time, he was a defense minister. So he has qualifications. Netanyahu doesn't. So I don't know where we're going with this yet, okay? But I do know we could start planning on the relationship with America and Israel to deteriorate, courtesy of the Americans. Netanyahu might want to cooperate with Biden and end the war, but he can't, because he'll get thrown out of office rather fast. People will file papers in the Supreme Court to remove him as a hazard to Israel and his conflict of interest and everything, and they may very well do it. And the military is not going to support Netanyahu under those circumstances, not going to come help him. The Supreme Court will put him on ice. And then they'll probably accelerate his criminal trials, and then they'll have an investigation, and Netanyahu will be up to here in sand, and he won't know what to do. Biden doesn't know what to do, and neither does Netanyahu, really. Netanyahu's trying to take Biden's lead, and, the blind follow the blind. They both fall in the pit, and that's where that goes. So that's it. I'm not thinking of much else going on right now. They're letting the hostages go pretty easily. We'll have 10. We got 10 today, plus 2 Russians and maybe some Thai workers tomorrow, another 10, and the day after another 10. That's the state of the art, the view from here. That's what's going on. So I send my shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach. Make sure you're subscribed, and you, in case something goes down and I have to do emergency updates, I'll do it here. Let me see if we got anything in the chat that needs addressing. Do you think this is when they say peace and safety? Not a chance. Nope, not a chance. And that is, the peace and safety is, they blow that out of proportion. When the 2 witnesses get killed and their bodies lay in the street and they send presents to each other, that's when they say peace and safety. Then there's a big earthquake and Yeshua comes back down and finishes it off. That's when that happens. Sorry to disappoint you. If you want to know what happens next, read Zechariah 12. And in verse 6, please pay attention to the 2 witnesses burning the enemies up on the right hand and the left hand of Israel, because they lay siege to Judah and Jerusalem. They surround it. They don't actually invade it. And that's Jacob's trouble. And that's in Zechariah 12. And the 2 witnesses are there, burning the enemies up. Who do you know has fire coming out of their mouth other than that? And that's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month, something like that. So get with the program on real Bible prophecy. What I told you is in the Bible, okay? What these other people are telling you is vague. you could go to my channel and go to the live section on my channel and start watching videos if you want Bible prophecy straight out of your Bible, not off the pulpit of some building. Okay, guys, that's it. I'm out. Thank you. I hope you got something out of this.